Welcome to the Expository Songs Podcast. We discuss songs where the main idea of a passage of scripture is the main idea of a song. My name is Daniel Mount, and today we're departing from our usual format a little. Usually we do a deep dive on a single song. Today we're going to do a bit of a broader look at an entire album, the brand new Christmas album, Come and See, by today's guests Matt Carpenter and Joel Arcieri, who write and perform together as the Grace Collective. Matt and Joel, welcome.
Thank you so much.
I'm charmed. Thank you.
Glad to have you here. Well, I would say, those who've been listening from the start will know that we had Matt on as one of our first episodes, episode 4, where we did a deep dive on the song Plant Your Word. Mm-hmm. And we did Matt's background and how Grace Collective came together, started recording. Maybe before we jump into talking about the album, Joel, if you can just introduce yourself briefly, talk about your salvation, how you came to get into songwriting and worship leading.
Yeah, so born as a PK, so born in the church, and honestly, all the stories you hear about PKs is true. I was the embodiment of all the bad things you would hear about a PK. And so I learned very quickly on a lot of the things that aren't supposed to be done in the church. And I learned, as I was growing, as I was in youth group, I learned a lot from a lot of guys. But I found music to be the thing that connected me to not just the Lord, but in accountability, right? I was put on worship teams. I don't know whether or not people agree, but there's usually more of a higher level of accountability for people on worship teams, like you're on stage. And so there was more investment in me than if I'd just been an attendee in a youth group. And so ever since I was a kid, I've been musical. My dad's a musical genius, and he taught me all the instruments I needed. Really, it was just, hey, I need to play this for a youth group. Can you teach me how to play bass? Okay, here you go. Hey, I want to play drums for youth group. Can you teach me how to play drums? And I did it. And so I was on worship teams in youth group. I did multiple youth groups. And then I went to a private Christian school where we had chapel. And so I was doing a ton of worship music back when Hillsong was really, really cool. It's still cool. But I mean, like back when it first was coming out, everyone's like, oh my gosh. So it was interesting even growing up in that world.
Are you talking like shout to the Lord Hillsong?
Okay, I'm not that old. Listen here, Dan. I'm not that. But
or like desert song?
Yes,
like,
desert song.
Like,
Hosanna.
Yeah.
From the Inside Out.
I was about to say.
Those songs were just coming out, and everyone's wanting to play them. But it was interesting. Like growing up, I was more of that. I was more, oh yeah, cool, let's do the Hillsong. And I wasn't really into hymns. And then as I transitioned out of high school and got into college, I started to appreciate more of I would say a formal reverence in song, right? So it's a lot of the other songs, it's not really formal, it's kind of casual singing, and these was like, hey, we are sing about and think about deeper truths in our songs, like hymns, or more of the Reformed people we'd see, like Sovereign Grace, the Gettys and everything. And so I started to even kind of see more of that, and I loved it though, because I feel like the Lord gave me more of a nuanced approach to songwriting as a result, right? It wasn't just I was just that one camp, or I was just this one camp. I was kind of playing both sides, going to different things, saying, okay, this does this really well, this does this really well. Where could we meet in the middle? Which was interesting, because that was setting the stage really for what Matt and I do a lot with our songwriting. And so then I started to work in the church, and that's actually how I met Matt. And so, this salvation that the Lord was kind of brewing within me when I was younger, and then I was saved as like a senior in high school. Then that salvation was fresh as I went into college, and as I was experiencing a different type of, oh, okay, this is, all right, now this music's a little different. And yes, people who just noticed I got saved when I was a senior in high school, and then I said I'd done worship music on a youth group worship team. I thought I was a Christian, wasn't. So, but you have that a lot. You're going to have kids in your youth group who are like, I'm a Christian. And you go later like, maybe not. But I realized that the Lord was really molding my devotion to him and my expression to him through song, really interestingly, as an eclectic way. And so as I got to be a worship pastor, I had a mentor who was more of the, hey, let's be more formal in our liturgy. Let's be formal in our songs. But I also worked for a church that was very not that. It was more of like, let's do fun, fast songs. That's how you open a set. And that was where I met Matt. And Matt has an incredible writing skill. He's a wonderful lyricist. And we kind of connected on like, okay, we both feel like you've got one side who's just the CCM, Hillsong, the big guys, and then you've got the Gettys and Sovereign Grace and City of Light. But like, is there anyone that's kind of writing for both in the middle, where there's people that are like, hey, I'm not just that, I like both styles, and that's how I met Matt.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Closest is Sovereign Grace, maybe. I mean,
Yeah.
Of the big three in Reformed circles, you're closer sound wise to what
Yeah,
Sovereign Grace
I would
is
agree
doing
with that.
than City Light or Gettys. You're not especially Celtic.
Well, that's because the City Lights basically writes the same song all the time, and they sound the same. So I'm kidding.
Wow.
I'm kidding.
Let's hope,
I get it,
maybe
but yeah.
we'll work with them one day. Who knows, Joel?
That's true, and I'll say it right to the. I'm kidding. No, I'm kidding. Keep going. So.
They
Sorry, I
definitely
forgot to
work
tell you
with
one of
it.
these cannons.
They work within a very a rather narrow window stylistically.
Yeah, I
But
agree.
definitely within that, I think all three of us would say there are some songs that are excellent and rise
my
above,
gosh.
like "Christ Is Mine Forevermore" or
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
"Grace." There's
Oh
just
my gosh.
they've done some phenomenal ones through the years for sure.
we do
But,
at least
yeah.
half a dozen City of Light songs at my church right now.
And Christ, Yet Not I, But Through Christ in Me
Oh,
is
that's
played
good.
in all types of churches. I've heard it played in the big CCM style churches. Like you're getting that style, and that's what I think City Light does well. Is they've given a more approachable style to some of those places, kind of like what Matt and I try to do with our stuff. So I agree.
Yeah, I heard them say in an interview once. Rabbit Trail, sorry, but I heard them say in an interview once that what they write for is most churches in Australia are small, do not have a lot of resources, might have one musician, and they're trying to write songs that the one guitarist in a church of 30 people somewhere remote in Australia can play.
Yeah,
And,
I love that.
Makes sense. That's
God
good.
bless them. That's who they're writing for, their audience, their people, that they know that's what they need. God bless them. And then sometimes they write a song that just transcends that.
Yep,
It works for us
very
here in
true.
the States too, and that's wonderful too.
I love it.
They find a lot of beauty in accessibility
Yes.
Yep.
and simplicity, but still finding good theological depth, and so they access a lot of all the things that you really do want in good worship songs for churches.
Yeah. Now, was I interrupting your story, Joel, or had you kind of wrapped up?
No. So that's kind of how Matt and I met, right? I was a young pastor, and I knew that community is really important, right? I learned that, like I said, from youth group, right? To be a worship person, you kind of need other worship people that are doing the same thing, that understand what you're feeling and thinking. And so I just started messaging every other worship pastor in the area, and I was like, hey, you want to get lunch like once a month or something? And so 1, 2 people started joining, and then friends started inviting friends. And so then Matt and I just kind of connected. He got invited there, and he was like, hey, I write music. And I was like, hey, I do too. And then we were like, hey, let's get together and like compare songs. And then we did, and we went, why don't we just make an album from this? And then he hated my first name that I put out, but I thought that was great. And my first name was The Grace Collective. I was like, we should name ourselves The Grace Collective. And he said,
Only
no,
because
that's so cringy.
The Grace Collective, it's the collective name. In that season of my life, there was like some friends of mine who created the most stereotypically hipster name that put collective in it, and that just had that baggage where I'm like, but we're like 2 people. Why are we called the collective? But
And
here we
yet,
are.
What's our name?
It's the Grace Collective.
But that's how we met. Yep. And that's my story.
Wonderful. So, moving on to the album, Come and See. It came out a week or 2 ago, and I would encourage listeners, like I always do toward the top of a podcast, usually I say this first thing, but I happen to get to it now. If you haven't heard this album yet, I'd encourage you to pause this podcast on whatever platform you're listening and go to your favorite streaming service and listen. And then once you've listened to the album, come back, listen to the podcast. You'll probably be able to appreciate the conversation more that way. So, Joel or Matt, whichever of you would prefer to jump on this question, you've done albums through Romans and Colossians. What prompted the idea to turn to Christmas and write an album from the Nativity and really the Advent passages too?
The non-spiritual answer is we wanted to do a Christmas album.
And I kept bugging him.
Yeah. But I also think that there was just excitement for it,
Right.
we got together in February of
Mm-hmm.
this year and at my house and just kind of had our own miniature songwriters retreat and launched from there.
Yeah. Yeah, it was I love Christmas music. And we also so Matt's still in that world. I'm not in that world anymore. Right? I serve on a worship team. I'm not the leader. I'm not picking music. But if anyone's out there who's picking songs right now, obviously probably right now for Christmas, they are already having exhausted most of the Christmas songs that you typically sing on a Sunday morning, right? And now they are starting to do Christmas carols and then just regular songs. And that's one of the hardest parts about Christmas season is can you find really good Christmas songs that are also congregational, right? They're not just old carols that we're just going to do and then we're done and we've checked that box. Or could they be more than that? And then we thought, well, what are other things you could do? What are other songs that you could write for Christmas? Well, you could write new Christmas carols or Christmas hymns. And so you find a couple of those on the album. But then we also thought, what if we could take some older Christmas carols or older hymns, but make it a more thematically connected from incarnation to resurrection, right? Because everyone says it, right? You can't have the resurrection without the incarnation. You can't have the incarnation without the resurrection. Like they are synonymous in that way. They have to happen together. And we thought, well, why can't that be said on Christmas, right? Why can't you sing about the fulfillment of the incarnation, what it's leading to on Christmas? And so all of that was kind of swirling around when we said, all right, let's just try to write those three types of songs: new hymns, redone old hymns, and then congregational worship songs for Christmas. And that's when we got together and we were like, wow, and it was feeling so natural too. And that was another reason why we had to do it. Was like, it felt like we were really doing it well. It was natural. We were hitting our stride as we were doing it. This is a project that we think that the Lord is really behind. And we want to put that out. And we wanted to give more worship leaders more Christmas songs that we just think are thematically, I think, a little bit sweeter. You're connecting those two things of the incarnation and resurrection. Sorry, Matt. I know I went off on that one.
No, that was good. Amen.
Thanks. So, Matt, you're still a worship leader? That's your role in your church?
He's an elder.
You're an elder and a worship leader?
Yes, so I serve with 4 other elders at my church, and my role is the associate pastor. We have kind of a lead among equals who is also on staff, and then I'm kind of his number dos. But then really, we all serve together. We all have equal voting and role, but I do the music. I look over life groups and all kinds of stuff, and so.
And then, Joel, you mentioned having been in that world, which is what prompted this question. Are you primarily in a different role in your church now, but still you mentioned some worship?
Yeah, so right now I serve on a worship team. So my wife and I moved from Delaware. We were part of a church up there, trying to revitalize it. Didn't go well. It's a long story, but we left ministry, occupational ministry, not in a fun way, right? And so I thought, all right, what do we do now? And my brother and my sister both work in tech, and they said, hey, you should work in tech. It pays better and better hours. And I said, yes, say less. And it was remote. And so I was interviewing with a job Cisco, and I was thinking, okay, where are we going to go? And my wife's family lives all down here in South Carolina, North Carolina. And I thought, let's just go down to the South. We always wanted to go back. I was born and raised in Virginia. I went up to the North. I was like, this is terrible. Don't live in Delaware. I'm sorry if anyone listening is from Delaware, but And we moved down to South Carolina, and we joined this church. It's a all massive church, but they do their ecclesiology really differently. And Matt and I have talked about how we love how they do it that way. And so we're a part of a smaller campus, a part of that church. And I just serve on the worship team. And I say just, like, I get to play electric guitar and sing harmony, and I love it. It's so much fun. Christmas time is my favorite time because I get to try to put the Top Gun theme song into any Christmas song I can. And I did that to Hark the Herald Angels Sing last year, and I'm going to do it to Joy to the World this week. So
that's impressive.
Just letting you know, it's like my favorite thing. And no worship leader, they don't mind. So I love it. But that's kind of what I do. So my main job is I work for Cisco Tech Company. I own a CrossFit gym. And I write music with Matt, and I get to play on worship teams. And it's really been cool to be on the other side, right? Matt is the guy leading the teams. And I just get to be the person that supports the leader, that hopefully practices, that hopefully plays nice with other people, and is actually just a I would just say like a kind presence that someone you really like to have on your worship team. And I've thought a lot about that.
I think you embody or try to embody as best you can what the author of Hebrews tells his readers, that like, hey, let those who serve over you do so without like grumbling, or just make it easy for them. Basically, that's the Matthew paraphrase translation, but
It's true.
That I admire that. It's good, brother.
Because we've been there. We've had people on our teams and we're going, oh my gosh, you don't know what you're going to get. And I always go, I do not want to be that person. I want to be the person that every time that I'm on the schedule, everyone thinks, I'm so happy he's on the schedule. Right. And so I love being in that position.
Cool. So let's just start going song by song. I'll ask a little question just to kick off the discussion on that song. But really, these are kind of, I think of them as open-ended. This isn't a heavily structured thing. Share whatever comes to mind on the song. So Come and See, the opener. There are a number of references to the prophecies pointing to Jesus' birth. Was it some balance of these Advent notes and the Come and See invitation that prompted you to start with this song in your song sequence?
Yes. The whole song, like you mentioned, is this invitation. But whenever we're writing any of these Christmas songs, Joel and I try to not just make sure that they were songs that had the whole scope of the gospel, incarnation to resurrection, but also didn't lose the forest for the trees in the biblical context, right? The coming of Jesus is all the way back prophesied in Genesis 3:15, right? And that's in verse 2, the promised seed come to us, sent to crush the enemy. And so this invitation to come and see Christ, particularly around Christmas, is just another reminder of God's faithfulness over thousands of generations.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think a lot about, too, when you look into the bridge, there's that passage that says, the bloody shed speaks for us, ringing out like silver bells. The little bit on the nose that, yes, we know we took the first part of the melody to silver bells for the song. But also, back in Genesis 2, right, when God is saying the blood of Abraham, or not blood of Abraham, brother Cain, your brother, it's speaking out, like it's. I know that what you've done because his blood is speaking about it. And I thought, how cool would it be to then say, like, the blood he shed speaks just kind of like that, but in a different way. It's ringing out that he shed this for us, like silver bells. And so it really was. We pulled a lot from Old Testament and Genesis, and just like how beautiful the story is, that this is the fulfillment. Now come and see it.
Yeah, but even that reference, so you're exactly right, Genesis, but in Hebrews, that's a quote from Hebrews.
Right.
The blood, Jesus' blood speaks a better word than the blood of Abel. And so, and then being able to say it's ringing out like silver bells, that was a fun time, because yes, the da 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 da, we're like, we know, that's what we're doing. But so lots of biblical themes that we just had fun kind of pulling from all over, but it all centers around Christ, which made it easy to write.
Yep.
The second song is This Just a Baby Boy? And I'm curious why you framed this from the framework of a rhetorical question. And in particular, a lot of songs might start with a rhetorical question, but this is so much the framework of the song, it's even your closing line. So curious why you took that approach heading into this song.
Joel, if it's okay, I'll say something about this one. Because I think this was the only one that you and I didn't co-write, correct?
No, I mean, you wrote most of this. I think we looked at it a little bit, but you definitely, this was your baby. No pun intended.
Hopefully a baby boy. But that's not an announcement for any friends who are watching. Wait, nothing is happening. We're good. Anyways,
good cover.
Oh,
good cover.
Getting married is stressful at times. And that's on the internet for the rest of the whole time.
Say, you're not allowed to get rid of that, Dad. You keep that.
No,
hey,
is there?
If you want to go back to the top of this question, we can.
No,
I might.
Oh,
but we're fine. We're fine. Just keep
going.
So I remember writing this song back in like 2020.
Mm-hmm.
And the first verse was the core of the identity. And I eventually wrote some other verses and things for it. But really the unsung hero of this song is my wife. ironically enough. Now, my wife listened to this song and she's like, something's missing. Something's missing. Like, it was all just set. We had 3 verses and it was all set in the nativity. You had Jesus being born, you had the shepherds, you had this. And she loved the question. And she said, why don't you bring it to the modern day and just kind of pose it to the listener and say, okay, these sheep and shepherds and wise men, they were wondering, is this just a baby boy? Do you think the same thing, right? Are you so lost in the December joys that you forget that this is more than just a baby boy being born? This is God being the savior of the world right here. He's light for the nations. And so I wanted to end the song on that question, just to leave that little bit of tension, because the point of the song is to make you think about Jesus more than perhaps you had thought before.
Right. Agreed. I couldn't say it any better, so.
So song 3 is "O Holy Nights" with the S at the end. And it's really interesting to me how this one starts with the familiar first verse everybody knows and sings every Christmas, before veering off kind of down a bit of an unexpected path. Which of you had the idea to start with this song, but write new verses about other nights in his earthly life and ministry, Gethsemane and then the nights before the resurrection?
Was it you? I know I desperately wanted to do this song.
Yes. So Joel was like, we need to do something with O Holy Night. So the reason there's any version of the song at all is Joel. I think we were kind of toying around with what we want to do.
Well,
and
we
I
knew
was
we
like,
didn't like the second verse.
Nights.
Yeah, we didn't like it. So I think I told it because I remember I did this song. We've done it every year back when I was a pastor. Every year we did this song. It was like our big candlelight song. But I remember you get to the second verse and you're like, I don't understand why I'm singing this, and I don't think anyone else understands why these words are happening at this point in the song, because it just felt like the second verse to me came out of nowhere. And
led by the light, or truly he taught us.
Truly he taught us. So the second verse that most people typically think, truly he
people
taught
don't
us
sing
to
Led by
love
the
one
Light, which
another.
is-
Right.
yeah.
You're going, oh,
Led by the Light's fine, but most people don't sing.
exactly. So typically people only really sing verse 1, verse 2, and then they repeat the chorus of verse 1, and that's it. Because the song's a long song if you do it that way. So they do the, "O Holy Night," and then they do "Fall on Your Knees," and then they'll do "Truly He Taught Us to Love One Another," right? And they'll do that, and then they'll repeat it, and they'll be done. But the thing that we kept thinking about was, man, it just didn't feel like you earned that ending with that, what most people would sing the second verse. And I stood by that. I think we could write a better second verse. And so that's when Matt was like, well, what if we wrote other nights, right? So there's that night, but then there's another night, but they're all holy, right? They're the holy night. So it was the night he was born, the night he was betrayed in Gethsemane, the night of his death. And then in that we talked about, hey, I think it was really cool because you started to add the resurrection in there. And what I love about the song melodically is it is just epic and anthemic. And I felt like we really had the opportunity to add some wonderful language on top of that wonderful melody that everyone knows. And I think that's one of the reasons why, a lot of people that I talk to, this is their favorite song. Because it has taken an old special hymn and made it that much better. And then we've given it breath and new life that I don't think has detracted. I think some people in their renditions, I was listening to a lot during this process, they just kind of do it in their own way and don't really add anything to the song. Whereas this one was like, hey, I think there's something to add. We think there's something to add, and we're going to try to do it. And if it fails, it fails. But I think we succeeded in saying, hey, let's add these 2 verses. Man, when you get to that end, he starts to breathe, the blood inside him coursing, right? You get to the end of the song, you're going, okay. And I would hearken it to or I'd compare it to Living Hope, right? There's that part of Living Hope, the song, where it gets really big. And I felt like, I think we do that, but with a Christmas song and the same type of language.
Every time we get to that he starts to breathe part, like you're right, musically, it's like that in Lion King when they say Mufasa, and you go, ooh, get it, that little moment. I don't know, for me, it's just like musically and lyrically, and just like you've gone on this journey. We just say 3 nights have passed as the new dawn arrives.
Exactly.
And then I'm like, yes, like every time he does that, I just want to like punch something.
Because
I don't know
you earn it.
why.
Because I really feel like you earn it
Yeah.
at that point. Yeah.
hmm
I think, yeah, definitely on my early listens through this album, because I've only been listening to it a few days. It's only been out a few days. But on my early listens, my take was, this is the main song that people will react to.
Yeah.
Either they will react with loving it because they don't mind some creativity being brought to a Christmas Carol, or depending on the context, there may be people who react with being grumpy that there's anything but the verses they've come to expect after the first verse. That's always the risk with this.
Yep.
You know, there will always be somebody who doesn't care for anything but Truly He Taught Us or Led by the Light, then Truly He Taught Us.
Right.
It is what it is. But yeah, definitely listening to this album over the last week or two, however long it's been since it came out, I was thinking, this is the one people are going to react to strongly, even more so than Make Our Sight Clear, which we'll get to in a few minutes. Like, this is the one people are going to feel some kind of way about, whether it's positive or negative.
I think the plural kind of, for me, I think gave us a little bit of a pass.
I don't know. Everyone kept asking if it was a typo. It's like, stop it.
Someone thought there was like copyright reasons that we had to like make it nights, and I'm like, no, that was
my goal too. We said it to each other was, man, you know, I'm not the person, like I said, I'm not the person who picks songs anymore. But if I was the person who picks songs, I would do this song on Christmas and Easter, right? Christmas Eve service, Easter, Resurrection Sunday, because it is such a beautiful connection and everyone knows it. And how cool would it be that we wrote a song that you could sing on both Christmas and Easter? And that was another thing that we wanted to put kind of in the hands of worship pastors and worship leaders and people who pick songs, like, hey, you could try this out. It might be good. We'll see what you do. So
I think in the churches I've been in the last 10, 15 years, because it was when I moved to North Carolina in 2010 that I went to my first Reformed Baptist church. The only song that fits that bill that would actually have been done on both in some of the churches I've been in would be In Christ Alone.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's one song. There's room to do more than one song that works in both contexts.
Yep.
Fair.
Agreed.
So I do like Oh Holy Nights, but I would have to say my personal favorite in the early listens is probably Here in the Waiting. There are several of the melodies on this album, but with this one at the top of the list, employ more prominent chromatic elements, some unexpected chords, chord progressions, melodic things than we might hear on your other albums. And so I'd love to hear general thoughts about the writing of this song, but then a specific question is, I'm curious if in writing this album, with some of the chord progressions we might hear in this one, or Is This Just a Baby Boy, or North Star, did you give yourself the freedom to, mix my metaphors, to paint with more shades in your palette because it was Christmas music? Or is this a stylistic development we might see more of in your future albums?
Here, let me take.
That's a good question.
Let me take the first part, and I think you will probably jump off of it. So, kind of going back, we said, all right, 3 categories. We've got our own Christmas carols, our own Christmas hymns, right? Then we have congregational worship songs, and then we have redone Christmas carols. So, Oh Holy Nights, redone Christmas carol, congregational worship song. We've got, you could even consider Is This Just a Baby Boy a little bit, or Come and See, definitely. And Here in the Waiting fell under that, hey, this is our own kind of Christmas hymn, which we both kind of felt, okay, if it's our own Christmas carol, Christmas hymn, we can kind of play around with where we want the feel and the vibe to go. And that was a big part about what I think enabled us with Here in the Waiting, specifically because anyone I talk to says, it just feels like I'm longing the entire song. And I went, exactly, that's the entire goal. Melodically, the entire goal is for you to feel like it's not resolved. And that's what we gave ourselves the room to play with. And the words just started to flow from there. I mean, I'll let Matt kind of go, but exactly what we're trying to talk about.
Yeah, Joel, I'll let you talk about more of the theme, because musically, this started out first as I just sat down at a piano and said, what would sound the most Christmassy?
You did. It was great.
Thing in the entire world. And like, we need a lot of minor 4s. And then I thought, what about secondary dominants? What if I put every single one that I could think of and just move up the chromatics,
Yeah.
the notes up and up and up, and it's probably the most Disney song I think melodically we've ever written.
Yep. Agreed.
But it also, you pointed out, you asked, like, was this just because it was Christmas? Part of that was, yeah. I think we felt a lot of freedom that when it comes to Christmas music, you can kind of let the dog off the chain when it comes to some of these melodies and some of these chords. Like, I would never personally actually do Here in the Waiting and in a Sunday morning worship service unless it was like a
Music,
meditative special music thing. But as a congregational song, it wasn't ever really intended to be that, and we had a lot of fun kind of exploring that route when our usual primary goal is to write congregational songs.
And I think also who knows, right? We don't know how long these songs will last. And I even thought when we were writing, I'm looking back to songs like O Come, Emmanuel, What Child Is This? Those are songs that were just very different. And people still sing them on Sunday mornings during Christmas time. Like, they throw these very different melodic structures in these songs, and they go, yeah, it works because it's Christmas. And my thought too was maybe 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now, someone says, yeah, we'll sing this during our Christmas Eve service because it's kind of like a carol. But the theme, though, came from, Matt kind of got tired. I was like beating the dead horse but let's think about this. What about, like, everyone's just waiting in the Christmas story. And then we're waiting today. Like, the shepherds have to wait. And he was like, yeah, I get it. And I was like, no. Like, the shepherds see this baby and then they're done. They go back to work. And then I thought, can we just unpack that a little bit? Like, you see the baby and then everyone goes,
yeah,
well, we got to go. When is he gonna? 30 years? Oh, cool, great. So fill in what do we do with the time? We just keep doing our thing, which is so much of our faith is, oh, Jesus saved me and he's coming back. And then in the time between, what do you want me to, just keep serving you. And that almost kind of mundane aspect of the Christmas story, which was, you're just waiting for the next thing for him to come back, or what's happening. Now he has arrived in the sense of his ministry has started. And then you get into that second verse. Okay, well, he's doing these amazing wonders. Could he be the Messiah? Well, now he's hung on a cross. So is it really the Messiah, right? I thought he was not going to be the one who dies. And then now we're watching as he leaves, but I thought he was here to help us. And once again, we're waiting. And so that was, as I said, I was beating that dead horse, and Matt got not annoyed, but very much like, okay, Joel, we get it. We're waiting.
Well, it's consistent, and it's really that I loved that idea. And yeah, at first I was like, okay, buddy, like, I get it. But
they're shepherds, they're going to do the sheep thing. And you're like, okay.
Right. But really, I loved that idea for how pastoral it is. Yeah. Because, Joel, I know that you're not serving in pastoral ministry officially, but you still have such a heart to care for others. And your thought was, well, this can serve people who are still in that feeling of waiting, that sense of longing at Christmas. And yeah, imagine just being a shepherd and going, yeah, woo, there's Jesus, high five. And then you got to go live 30 years. And maybe you even die before you get to see Jesus start his earthly ministry.
Exactly.
I can't think of, this is not impossible for a congregation to sing. It could be done. Like, in my church context, where we do some modern hymns, but really a lot of older hymns, and we'll do O Come, Emmanuel, What Child Is This? I think we've already done both of them this year.
Most likely.
I couldn't think of a reason why we couldn't do this one congregationally, and in fact, I may have to, not dare, but talk to Pastor Chad about this. My pastor is a college friend of Matt's, Chad Berry. He's done a number of co-hosted a number of the episodes.
Nice.
So we have a mutual friend there, which is how I found out about the Grace Collective, actually. Yeah. There's no reason my church couldn't do this congregationally.
Cool.
It's not like, oh, Holy Night's hard to sing congregationally, unless you're a really good singer. Average singers are hard. There are some songs that are structurally, range-wise, hard to do. This song's doable. Cool. And I love chromatic stuff. I love stuff that just pulls from more than your the chords that everything else has. And also not just congregationally, but in the listening experience of listening to an album. It really breaks everything up nicely.
That was our intention.
Yeah, it does. So moving on to the song 5, Make Our Sight Clear. Did you start with the idea of Make Our Sight Clear and this tension between what we can see clearly now and what's or what they could see clearly now, what's cloudy now, what we'll be seeing clearly in the future, and start like with a chorus and that general idea? Or was your starting point more, we're going to take It Came Upon the Midnight Clear and write a chorus and some new verses, and that's
so funny.
the theme you ended up on?
Well, one thing I will say, just as a peek behind the curtain, so Matt and I's song process, I think it's really fun. So what will happen is we'll sit down, and if we're writing a song from scratch, we'll kind of talk about and work through a verse, melody, chord structure, lyrics. And then typically we go, all right, let's go on mute. Joel's going to work on a chorus. Matt's going to work on the second verse. Because typically, most of the time, the choruses that kind of come to me melodically and sometimes lyrically are usually what we use 90% to 95%. And it's just because
a lot of the time.
Yeah, and because like the Lord has just gifted me in that way. It's not that Matt, it hasn't gifted Matt, but we both lean into our strengths. The funny thing was Make Our Sight Clear didn't even have a chorus for forever. And we were just, I think Oh Holy Nights enabled us to kind of go, hey, maybe we could change the words and to make it more incarnation to resurrection idea, right? Maybe we could make it a little bit more thematically clear, no pun intended. But that's kind of where, and then the chorus was like a tag at the end, but then every time we'd finish a verse, we went, I feel like I just want to sing that. And so then it inserted itself within as a chorus.
And that happened pretty
Very
late
late.
in the process. Pretty late. But the Claritin Clear idea of like, that came to us was
I have expected to be like, clear eyes.
Well, a lot of these Christmas songs for us was taking just one little nugget from like the verse and going, let's just explore that idea. Oh, holy nights, right? Well, night. Well, what if there's more than one night that's significant in Jesus's life? And there is. Well, it came upon a midnight clear. That's for both of us. We realized, well, yeah, it was clear then, right? But now, as Paul says, we see in a mirror dimly.
Exactly.
And then even taking the second half of Easter's peace on the earth, goodwill to men, right? Where we're playing with that, going, okay, we sing that, but in verse 2, it hasn't come to pass, right? And it's not going to till Jesus gathers all his people in.
Yep.
Well, verse 3 is finally, peace on the earth, goodwill to men, his marvelous kingdom come inside the New Jerusalem. We'll live with him as one, and we still end with that plea to the Lord to make our sight clear, to help us. Yeah, until then. Which, again, was just another cool opportunity to take a Christmas hymn and stretch it to a broader context that makes it easier to sing, not just at Christmas, but potentially at other times of the year.
And like the sound it's very much me. If you know Grace Collective, you think back to Future Glory, right? If you know me and my kind of leaning and bent in my voice, that's actually more natural, is to sing like It Came Upon a Midnight Clear. A little bit more, interestingly enough, Southern blues kind of style. If you know the Civil Wars, kind of like them. So that's honestly my comfort zone in my wheelhouse. And I think when we were singing it, I just liked that. And then we went, why don't we just do it?
Well, that was fun because we sat down at my piano, and like sometimes I do things like, haha, joking, that'd be fun. And then Joel's like, but what if we really did that? And that's like a lot of our relationship is me going, oh, no, never. And Joel's like, oh, yeah, but that's a thing.
Yep.
We should do that. And then us finding the middle ground most of the time. But this was just me being like, oh, what if we did this all bluesy? And I could tell Joel was like, this is my jam. I'm ready for this. So the moment we started doing
I love that about our songwriting. I mean, I know you said I think before the show, you wanted to also like unpack our process, or I think in the beginning. And I think that's one of the ways and reasons why Matt and I work so well together is I am someone who is open to anything. Like in my life, I have learned that so much joy is gained through just living your life open-handed and everything. And so if there's an impulse or a thought, I go, let's just explore it. What's the harm in exploring this idea? And that has enabled Matt and I to work well together, because Matt will have an idea. Whereas I think in other relationships, if I was more stringent, he would either not share it or go like, hey, we'll share it, and then expect me to turn him down, and I would turn him down. But he'll share something, and I'll go, I actually really like that. Let's do that, or let's change this. And then it makes the songwriting process feel so much more free. I really do feel like our songwriting process feels like it's this beautiful freedom of, let's just explore.
Right. Well, and we explore ideas, but my main focus is not let's explore every single idea. I just want to make sure that our idea is clear and focused, right? So whatever we're going to be writing about, I want to make sure that, we know what we're trying to say before we start writing sometimes. Yeah. Like that helps too.
It's almost like you poured like I'm the water you pour on the ground, and then Matt is the boundaries sometimes. And then there's like the water just starts to go this way, and then we go, actually that does fit. Let's do that. And then or the water shouldn't go this way. And I think that's why we work so well together. Is I want to constantly explore, and then Matt will bring us back to, hey, well this does work, but let's try to move it this way. And then that's one of the ways that it works well. Agreed.
Yeah. One thing that having new verses for this song does for us is something that's along a similar vein of what you were sharing with some level of uncomfortability with a Truly He Taught Us verse on O Holy Night.
Right.
Joel. I love It Came Upon a Midnight Clear. It's up there. It's probably my top 5 favorite Christmas carols.
Wow.
Joy to the World is number 1. I like doing that
Classic.
song year round. I have pulled that out in July before.
Nice.
At church. But this is up there just because I like the lyrics, but the chord progressions, the melody, but especially the chord progressions and the way they build are really something. But the lyric was written by a Unitarian pastor, Edmund Sears, in the mid-1800s. And that last verse is kind of where it shows more, because the last verse in the original says, "For lo, the days are hastening on, by prophets seen of old, when with the ever-circling years shall come," what a lot of churches will sing today is, "Shall come the time foretold."
Right.
But what he originally had was, "When with the ever-circling years shall come the age of gold."
Right.
And the ever-circling years and the age of gold has to do with Unitarian eschatology. I'm not up on all the details of it, but he was saying something he meant to convey meaning with it. It wasn't just nice poetry. And I'm like, why am I in a church context singing Unitarian eschatology? This gets us out of this with singing your new verses to it. We can still sing the melody. We can still sing that first verse.
Exactly.
Which is why most of us love it. And we can sing something that builds on this clarity idea.
Well, and when it comes to eschatology, obviously there's a lot of differing views, but we tried to write it in a way where, like, I'm Amil unashamedly. Joel, aren't you more?
I have no idea. I literally, when I stopped being a pastor, I stopped. I'm sorry. I stopped caring as much about it.
Either way,
don't hate me, everyone.
We tried to write it in such a way where it wasn't so hard on, like, this is our view of eschatology, but still very clear that, like, Jesus comes back when he gets all that the Father has given to him.
And we used that.
That's clear.
Because the last verse does have some aspects. In the old version, it has, like, and the whole world will send back that song, which the angels now sing, right? That's the ending of that last verse. And we looked at it and we thought, okay.
There are good elements.
What'd you say?
There are good elements.
Right, it is. Sure. And so that's where we wanted to keep that. Let's look heavenward. But yeah, it did feel like there was a big focus on, obviously, the night that it happened. But we thought, let's pull back a little bit and let's expand more to other times in which, is our sight clear yet? No, but it will be clear. And I think it really, the same thing that we talked about in O Holy Nights. Does it feel like you earned that? That was the biggest thing when we were working on these lyrics and adding lyrics. Do you feel like you earned the end? And we felt like you earned the end in O Holy Nights, and we feel like you earned the end in Make Our Sight Clear.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right, song 6 is The Word of God, or Gloria. And I would say, just on my initial listens, this seems to me to be one of the most congregational songs on the album. At least as I'd hear it from my context, where we sing mostly hymns and modern hymns. So I'd love to hear any thoughts you have on writing it, but it also prompted me to wonder, which you talked a little bit about what you would do. I'm curious if either of you have used any of these songs, this song or other songs from the album, congregationally yet. And if so, which ones are really catching on in your context that people are remembering week to week and coming back and singing on that second or third time?
I'll start with that one. We just introduced Come and See this past Sunday.
Cool.
I was going to do a Christmas song the week before, but just circumstances in our church didn't feel like the right time to introduce a Christmas song. So this week was the time to do it, and I wrestled. I mean, like it's like choosing your favorite kid. You're like, I can't, but I'm gonna choose this one. And so we did Come and See. But an interesting note about this song is I have done a version of the Word of God in my church for a couple of years. Because this song used to just be a hymn that I wrote from John 1 and sang around Christmas time. And it was all right. I mean, it was good.
Yep.
I thought it was pretty good. But I don't know. When we started looking at it again, our producer was like, if we had more room, this song would be like okay to put in, and that's not like high praise for any song that you're
that's
writing.
another
Like,
thing. We have a great, I mean, Sean Uphill, fantastic producer. If you're looking to produce and get great, because he said, look, this is kingdom work. If I'm going to put my name on something with kingdom impact, which is a worship album or songs for the Lord and for the church, I want it to be the best it can be. And he looked at all of our songs, and Word of God, he said, it's not anything special.
It's not there.
And so
No.
Matt, so we shelved it, but Matt, similarly to me, I was like, I really want this song. And I wanted different styles for other things, and he wanted this song. And so we had this was another reason why I think we work well. We had a very honest conversation. I said, it doesn't sound interesting, the old version. And it's just meh. It's boring. I think we could make it better. And so we literally changed it 3 times. We changed the melody 3 times. We changed a lot of the words.
The feel.
Yeah, we changed the feel but then, which was so cool, and I think this once again is how we work well. When we changed the verse and the melody and the structure and the feel, immediately the chorus came to mind for me. I mean, I don't even think it took me a second to come up with the chorus. Then we really started to go downhill, and we went, okay, now we have momentum. I think this would be really good. And so it's wonderful that if you're writing a song, this is advice to a songwriter, you need someone who is not biased and is also worth their salt to be able to tell you it's not great. I think it could be better. If you want to put the time in, it could be great. But right now, not.
Right. And it was also helpful lyrically that we had a lot of content that we could keep. So you don't always have to trash everything about a song. You can still take what's good. Because that's why you write as much as you can. Because sometimes you can just take one line from another song you wrote and take that as the idea for a completely different song. True. And so just...
I've done that.
Us too.
I've done
great.
That. Yeah.
Yep.
I was collaborating with an accomplished writer in Southern Gospel 10 years ago, working on a song, and there was a line I loved in that song. It was my favorite line in the song, but she didn't like it so much it didn't make the final cut, which is fine. And that was the title of a different song. So yeah,
that's cool.
So the last song is really interesting, North Star.
Interesting.
It is interesting to me because when the wise men come to mind, you do these word association things. Wise men, maybe not technically a word association, but a phrase association. Wise men, one of the first things that pops into my mind is we have seen his star in the east. And of course, I get there's the general sense of metaphorical. We'd say following a North Star for a sense of direction. Right. But even so, it's just unexpected how you get there. And I'm really curious how your thought process led to tying together the idea of the wise men, who were following a star in the east, with our cultural or metaphor of a North Star. Not criticism in any way. I'm not saying it's wrong. I was just unexpected.
Go, Mr. Matt.
And the unexpected makes you think, and I got thinking, and this is really interesting.
Well, I'm listen, Daniel. This is the second time for me on your podcast, which is a privilege. So I feel like I can just be real with you.
Sure.
I forgot that it was in the East first. I didn't even that wasn't even a thought in my mind
Nope.
as to which
Your
direction.
only thought was the fact that the ukulele line sounded cool. Let's be honest.
Well, not the only
One
thought,
of the main
but
thoughts.
I did like it. The ukulele thought was a jam, and so that was helpful. But two, just the whole concept of the song was the wise men had the star that they followed to Christ. What was Jesus's guiding star, right? It was God's will, his Father's will, right? I came to do my Father's will. And then what's our guiding star? And you're right, it's our modern phrase of what's your North Star or what's your compass? But so Jesus is our North Star. But you're right. Yeah, it's supposed to be in the East, but
It works.
it's fine.
It's fine. It works.
Oh, I love that he got you on that. It's the best part. I'm so happy. You're like, what?
Sorry, I don't like razzing people's not my
I
thing.
wish
and I
it
didn't
was.
mean that as a
I wish
razz
it was.
exactly, but
No, I was just being real. I'm not gonna say, oh yeah, well of course we knew which star, and we're just gonna.
It was-
no, I forgot.
Something that I have loved. We've done it. I think we have done it in almost all of our albums. Is we like to end an album with something sweet, some type of sweet melody or song. I think it even started back when I did an EP a long time ago with my wife, and we did "Give Me." What is the song? Is it "Give Me Jesus"? Yeah, "Give Me Jesus." We did "Give Me Jesus," and we did it like one mic in the room. I was plucking a guitar. We were singing, and it was just very soft, intimate, and sweet. And when he broke out the ukulele and was playing it, I was going, I think that's the same type of feel we should go for. And that was the whole thing we were pursuing, was this type of kind of ending the album in a sweet way. We've done that with a lot of our other albums. We did it with the Romans album when we ended with the acoustic version. I think in Kingdom of Your Son we end with, do we end with Plant Your Word?
Kingdom of Your Son, no. We end with Set My Mind.
So, not the same, but we try to end it in some type of sweet way. And I think that's where we landed with North Star. It just felt sweet.
Well, and not just sweet, but nostalgic. Yeah. It felt nostalgic. It felt thought-provoking for some. Like the best way that I can think about it is like when you're listening to a song and you get lost in a daydream. Like that kind of feeling, a far off effect happens to me, at least when I listen to it. And I used this with, I mentioned this to Joel a bunch. It's like, it reminded me of You're Gonna Live Forever in Me by John Mayer. The ending of one of his albums. And it's this very, You've Got a Friend in Me, Randy Newman, whatever his name is, kind of sound. And so there's elements of that in there, especially like with the whistling, right? The whistling was, do we keep it? Do we not do it? Do we do more? Do we do less? But I had one friend, and this is a really sweet thing. And obviously this wasn't the intention of what we wrote, but a friend of mine recently lost his firstborn son. And for some reason, the Lord has pressed on his heart this song and what he told me. And obviously, like, if you wanted to get into the theological things and like you could fight, you could poke, I just took it as really sweet. He just said, whenever I hear this and I hear the whistling, for some reason it makes me think of my son.
Wow.
And somehow that he's somewhere far off, but I'm gonna see him one day. And like, I know that that's not like why we wrote the song, but it was really sweet and really encouraging that there's a sentimentality to the song that I can't quite explain, but I got to see evidence of it.
It's almost like a sigh when you reminisce about things. When you're reminiscing about like a really fun time or a good time in your life, and you just sigh and release it. That to me felt like this was the song for that album. For this album, is that moment where you go, "That was really nice." To think
It lands the plane.
It is. It is a very sweet ending. It's also really cool to see God already starting to use these songs in unexpected ways.
Yeah,
Mhm.
amen.
Before we wrap up with how people can keep up with what you're doing online, there are a couple of things that came up earlier in the podcast that I meant to go back to and forgot to. One is, I'm curious, I don't think that, because all I see is streaming services, I don't think the streaming service says, who was your guest vocalist on Come and See?
Which I got flack about my small group this last week, Matt. They were like, "Hey, where's her credit in the feature?" Which I made the joke.
She's in the song credits.
I said, I made the joke. Look, he texted me. I was in a meeting, and then he said, "Too late." I sent it on to the meeting.
Yeah, I was so anxious to get him up there. I was just like,
so it's my wife. My wife is actually now sang on. But so this song she sang on "Growing" in Kingdom of Your Son. So there's 2 songs she sang on of our music, and I still feel so bad for her for "Growing" because we kept it in a male key and we shouldn't have. But this song, immediately when we were working on this song, oftentimes, so another peek behind the curtain, you probably have guessed it if you've been a longtime fan of the Grace Collective. Typically, the more big vocal songs I will do, because that leans more, my voice leans better to that. And then Matt will do the more sentimental, softer, more intimate, because that's where his voice leans better to, just with our range and our control. But this was going to be probably another one of mine. And I looked at it and I heard it and I went, I really think it needs to be a female, and I really think it needs to be my wife, because there is something interesting about her intonation and the way that she phrases and the way that she forms her mouth around certain words. I was like, I really think that this would be a good fit. And we did. So we took our 2 kids to the studio in Atlanta, which was somehow, Lord willing, it worked out and it was great. But it was fantastic, and a lot of people have even said it's one of their favorite songs because they're like, "Who is this female vocalist?"
Yeah, she did a great job.
She did. And then, speaking of great jobs, you gave your producer a shout out earlier and said, essentially, if somebody's listening who needs a producer. But I'd like to follow up on that. What's his name again? And do you know, is it web, social media? What's the best way to find him if somebody wants to put out an album in that general vein of stylistically where you went with these albums?
So his name is Sean Hill,
Okay.
and he runs Uphill Studios, which is literally out of his home, if I remember correctly. But I think Joel is currently researching how to find him.
The craziest thing is because it's like, doesn't have a ton of socials. But let me see. I'm pretty sure he has on Instagram. I will keep looking if you want to do other things while I'm doing this.
Sure. Well, then, while he's looking at that, we can move over to Matt with how can people keep up with the Grace Collective online, as well as anything else. If you have any other projects coming out that you'd like to mention too.
Yeah, the best ways really to keep up with us are through our Facebook or Instagram. Right now we have a Twitter, but it has long since been abandoned. So the 2 main social medias, Facebook and Instagram, we just recently got the kind of bare bones basic website back up.
Oh, good.
That at least is a place where you can go to the Grace Collective 757.com, and you can, if you want resources, the basic thing is it gives you our email so you can ask us for those resources. We used to have a website that could let you download them directly, but right now, at the very least, if I get an email, I can send you the charts for whatever you asked for.
Exactly.
Cool.
So I would just look for his Instagram. It's just Sean Paul Hill, all together, and then message him.
And that's Sean. That's SEAN.
Yes, Sean SEAN. Paul PAUL Hill, and then you can inquire about services there. So yeah. And then for me, to follow me. For me, it is so on Instagram I am Joel Conwell, because my last name is too hard to spell. So it's a little bit easier to spell my for my middle name, which is Conwell. So it's Joel Conwell. You can find me on Facebook as well. You can follow us, the Grace Collective 757 on Instagram. And then we also have a Facebook as well, like Matt said. And then I actually, Daniel and I were talking before, I have an old podcast if you're interested in kind of listening to some other stuff and hearing my silky sweet voice some more on a podcast. It is called the Theology of Music podcast. Back in the day, did that one, and then
and just for the sake of the listeners, shout out some of, because there are some overlap with what you did and what I'm doing here in hearing from artists, some of whom are songwriters. Just shout out the names of some of the artists who have been on there. Because I suspect that will pique the interest of some of the listeners in going and checking it out.
Yeah, so I've had people like Mike Donaghy from 10th Avenue North, Zach Bolin from Citizens, Meredith Andrews. Just to name a few. I've had those guys. I had some more of indie artists. One of my favorite bands is a good friend of mine. It's the Journey Worship Co. They're putting out great music all the time. It's another band you should really listen to. They're not quite like, they're not on the level of the big three and they're known as in Reform circles. But I think they should be, because I think they write amazing music. And so there's where you can follow me. Also, Dan wanted me to shout out my relationship stream that I do on Thursday nights, which is The White Hitch. Don't at me. One of my friends who is black said you're like the White Hitch. So there's where that one came from. But I read Reddits and I talk about advice about what to do for relationships. I have a great matchmaking record. I'm at 100% of getting people married. So
wow.
I know what I'm talking about. I have masters in counseling, so you know. But anyway, Thursday nights this week, I think I'm starting it back up again. So Thursday nights I think it's 8. So
cool.
That's
so funny.
Is there anything that you might have had on your mind? Like, I had a couple things to follow up on. Anything that you had on your mind to mention about the album that I just didn't think to ask about that we didn't get to?
Oh, we're gonna be at CrossCon. I can't believe we didn't say that.
Oh yeah! Oh my goodness. Cool. Yeah. January 3rd through the 5th in Louisville, Kentucky, in the exhibition rooms where normally you hear people doing like live recording of podcasts. We'll have 2 opportunities to just lead some worship and get some exposure and share some of our music with other people.
Yep. Sorry, I didn't know what we were going to say, Matt.
Oh, this is just a funny tidbit. We talked about the Word of God, Gloria.
Yeah.
I checked on our artist for Spotify for Artist page where you see all the logistics.
Yeah.
Well, in the last 3 days, the Word of God has been streamed 1,000 times. Now, that's aggressive, and it all comes. It's awesome, and it's all from Honolulu.
Yes, which was kind of crazy.
And I actually know why.
Oh, wait, you do?
So, long story short, there's this really sweet couple that has come to my church a few times, and they're actually really big fans of what we do. So they've heard this Christmas album, and they're in Hawaii right now, and they told us they think it's the best thing they've heard in like 55 years. And so they're sharing it with radio stations. They've messaged the Gettys. They've messaged any person that you could possibly think, like K-Love Submissions. And she messaged me today saying she had the Word of God on loop, and her goal is to get every song to 1,000 plays on Spotify.
I want to hear.
That's cool.
And I want to hear if she also gets anyone else to play our songs on the radio. Let's go.
I know. And so I just sent her this email just saying, well, thank you so much, for your support and all this. But I just thought that was so out of the blue, but so cool.
I love it. So funny.
Those random stats are so interesting, especially when you get to the bottom of it. That's cool.
Yeah, you're like, where is this person? Who is it? Who in the Philippines is listening to our music? Who's in Australia listening to our music? What is happening? Yep.
I know.
Love it.
Somewhere.
Well, thank you both so much for taking the time to come on and do this. This was definitely out of the format I've done in the past, but I really enjoyed it.
It was, dude, you're great. It was such an honor and a blessing to be a part of this.
This was a ton of fun.
Thank you. And to the listeners, if you enjoyed this episode, I'd encourage you to share it with a friend and subscribe to catch future episodes. You can also find past episodes and the free 58,000 entry Expository Songs searchable database at danielmount.com. Thank you for listening.
See you guys.